Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is touch. Let's take a moment to look at some definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear touch used is to mean to come into or be in contact with someone or something. So with this definition, you might notice I'm sitting in a chair. The chair is touching the floor. It is coming into contact with it. Right? A second way you'll hear touch used is to mean to bring a part of one's body into contact with someone or something. Perhaps you've been reading a story where one character touches the hand of another character, right? So you can kind of visualize one hand coming into contact with another hand. A third way the verb touch gets used is to mean to handle or manipulate. So many times as we use this, we mean it in a negative way, particularly a bad way, maybe even to cause harm. So you might, in this instance, think of some children. One sibling is maybe trying to get to the toys of another, right? And they might say, "Don't touch my toys," right? Don't handle them. Don't play with them. And then another way to kind of connect to this definition. Perhaps someone is threatening violence to do something bad, right? To another person you're watching, you might say, "Don't touch them," right? Don't hurt them. Don't come into contact. A fourth way the verb touch gets used is to mean to consume or use. And with this definition, it's really common to hear this used in a negative way. So an example might be the children won't touch broccoli, meaning they won't eat it. Okay? Other people might say, "Oh, I don't touch alcohol," meaning I don't drink alcohol. So those are some ways you might see consume or use connect to this particular verb. A fifth way to use the verb touch is to mean to produce feelings of affection or gratitude. With this definition, it's really common to see the passive voice used. So someone might say, "I was touched by," and then maybe describe an action or some words that someone else shared, particularly maybe in a challenging moment or a difficult situation. A sixth way we can use the verb touch is to mean to reach a specified level or an amount. So sometimes as I hear companies describe how business is going, you might see or hear a phrase like sales touched $1 million. So they reached that particular level. You should know that touch is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all we need to do is add ing to form touching. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, touch, ends in an unvoiced ch sound. So our past tense ending is going to make a t sound. It should sound like this: touched, touched. Okay. Now, there are a number of phrasal verbs connected to this verb touch, and that's what we're going to focus our discussion on today. The first phrasal verb we're going to look at is to touch down. The meaning here is to land or to make contact, particularly with the ground. An example of this might be, the space shuttle touched down just after noon yesterday. Okay? Here's a simple past tense sentence describing that a spacecraft, a shuttle, made contact with the ground. You might also hear people just say it landed at this particular time. Now, I want to note, for some people, when they hear touchdown, their mind may go to American football. So in that sport, touchdown is a noun, and it is a compound word. So we would combine touch and down. So phrasal verb, we're keeping them separate into two words. Another phrasal verb you might hear is to touch off. This can have a few different meanings. One might be to cause a fire or an explosion. An example of this: lightning has touched off several small forest fires. Here's an example of the present perfect. So we're describing an action that occurred some point in the past, a few times in the past, but we don't know exactly when. Another way to use touch off is to mean to initiate. And initiate means start. Another way to say that, to trigger, so to cause something else to happen. An example of this might be, the decree touched off anger throughout the country. So in this sentence, another simple past tense sentence, we have a decree, some kind of formal announcement from a government, maybe a new policy, a new rule that's being put into place. And it has created or started a lot of anger. Maybe there are protests as a result of this. A third way you'll hear touch off used is to mean to describe with precise detail. Now, this third definition for this particular phrasal verb, I would say, is the least common, but you might hear it in connection to the arts and particularly literature. I have an example sentence here. This documentary will touch off Rosa Parks better than any other books or movies have. I've been reading about a new documentary. I think it's released this week that is going to portray and share this very important figure's life in a very different way. And my understanding is there's going to be more specific details, maybe true, not kind of our romanticized version of this person. And so I thought that was a great example for us to see. Now let's continue looking at a few more phrasal verbs. The next one you might hear is to touch on. This can have a few different meanings. One would be to deal with a topic in passing. So here this means kind of briefly. We're not going in depth. An example of this might be, the article touches on sleep's impact on health, but it mainly focuses on diet and exercise. Okay, so we can imagine an article that's talking maybe about healthy habits, things we should or shouldn't do, and it just briefly says something about sleep. So that's why we're saying it connects or it deals with this topic very quickly, just in passing. A second way you'll hear touch on used is to mean to concern or pertain to. An example of this: the issue of climate change touches on every living thing on this planet. So this sentence is saying climate change concerns all of us. It affects all of us. A third way to use touch on is to mean to approach being, usually something else. Let's take a look at the example I have here. The celebration touched on a riot. So you might imagine, unfortunately, it feels like it happens quite frequently here in the US. A sports team wins a big game, right? And there might be a celebration that starts to kind of approach or look like a riot, a very dangerous situation where people can be hurt. The last phrasal verb we'll look at is to touch up. This means someone is making improvements, and generally it's just small corrections, small changes, maybe little additions to make something a little bit better. An example of this: we're going to touch up on our essays during this class period. Maybe you've heard a teacher say something like this. So we're going to work on editing. We're not making big changes. We're not rewriting large segments, but we're trying to polish or make this just a little bit better. And then I realized as I've been speaking here, I haven't mentioned the verb tenses in some of my examples. The first two touch on examples, dealing with a topic and concerning, are both examples of the simple present. The third example of touch on was an example of the simple past tense. And then the last here, we are going to touch up our essays. That's an example of the simple future using be going to. Now, let's spend a moment looking at just a few words and phrases connected to touch. There were so many things for me to choose from here. The related words and phrases could certainly be its own video, but let's talk about the noun form of this word first. So, same spelling, same pronunciation, touch can be a noun, and I want to note the noun touch has so many different meanings. I've just picked 3 to focus on. So one way you'll hear it used is just to refer to that act of touching someone or something. So making contact, having one body part touch some other part of a person or another thing. An example of this, give him a gentle touch on the shoulder. Right? So here, maybe we're looking for something, a very, very soft kind of contact, not something violent where we take both hands and shake a person. A second way you hear the noun touch used is just to refer to a small amount of something. Maybe you see something like this in a recipe. Add a touch of vinegar to the dressing, to the salad dressing, right? So they just mean a small amount. A third way you'll hear touch used is to refer to a distinctive manner or a method of doing something or dealing with something. An example of this might be, I can always see my friend's touch in her choice of a birthday gift. So, what I might be describing here is this friend does something unique, something special on birthdays or when it comes to giving gifts. It's not like here's a gift card, right? Or just here's a card. Maybe this person makes something, right? And that is what makes it distinctive or unique. Another related word you'll hear is the adjective touching. This really describes some strong feelings. Again, it could be of sympathy, appreciation, could be of gratitude. But it's an adjective that has really positive meaning. So an example of this might be, she received such touching cards and messages after her surgery. So people were writing, I'm thinking of you, I hope you're doing okay, right? Other messages that made her go, oh, right, and kind of feel good inside. A phrase you might hear is out of touch. This can mean that somebody is unaware or maybe unable to understand a current event, some kind of development, or maybe they're unable to understand some concerns or difficulties, challenges that others might be experiencing. An example of how we are hearing this a great deal right now in the United States as we approach elections are, voters won't elect a candidate who is out of touch, right? So, and many times if you happen to be here in the US and watching any kind of television, you're going to get lots of political ads, and all of our candidates want to look like a regular person, not a millionaire, not somebody who lives very differently than most of the population, because they don't want people to think like they don't understand what my life is like. They won't represent me well. The last phrase I'll leave you with today is touch base. You hear this a lot in business and many workplaces, and really what it means is somebody is asking to communicate. And this form of communication could be very different based on the people. Sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes it's a text or an email. It could be a face-to-face meeting. Kind of have to know your work environment, but a way you might hear it might be, let's touch base before Friday's meeting with the client. Okay, so I heard things like this in many of my prior workplaces, and generally it meant This is pre-pandemic, of course, so it meant like, let's meet face to face and talk. Maybe discuss, what are we going to talk about? Do we have updates to share? Maybe we have new information, but it's kind of like formulate a plan before we have this other meeting. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.